What if everything you've been told about building a business is a lie? We're revealing the unfiltered journey that hundreds of founders took to go from idea to a profitable business on their own terms. Whether you're just getting started,
you can be an amazing business owner without going to business school.
Wanting to be your own boss,
I realized that I had built brands for other people and it was time for me to build one for myself.
Reaching for that next revenue goal.
7.5 years ago, I was sitting in my living room, building a website and launching a brand. Now we are a $100 million business.
Or finally getting your brand the recognition it deserves.
Ultimately, that's how Nick Jonas found out about the brand.
You can do it without playing by the rules.
I was just like, screw it. We're just not going to have a brand book.
No gatekeepers, no excuses, just receipts. You're watching the best of Shopify Masters, your companion for starting and building a business.
Water that presents itself like a beer or energy drink so that it doesn't feel like you're missing out. I think for decades, healthy brands have decided that they couldn't be compelling. They had to speak in a specific way to people and they had to look healthy and they had to feel healthy. And so what we did was just look at the fact that the most fun brands in the world also happen to be the ones that are maybe the worst for you, right? Beer and energy drinks and candies and chips. And these are always the brands that when you look at the Super Bowl have the most fun, crazy ads, right? And so we just sort of said, hey, what if we took that energy but just pointed it towards something that was better for you? And that's really what Liquid Death is all about.
It's radical, but it actually sounds so simple when you say it out loud.
Right.
You know, it's like, why does the healthy thing have to feel like spinach? Like, Of course, if you make it fun, it's going to be more compelling for people, right? Speaking of, importantly, we should be having some fun of our own.
Okay.
Yeah. And let's give it a little ASMR, you know?
There you go. There you go.
That's, I think, the best sound on the planet. It's delicious.
10 calories. There you go.
It's delicious. You didn't join right at the onset of the company. You came when it was like starting to build a little bit of momentum, right?
Yeah, I joined in 2021, right as we were first starting to appear on store shelves. So it had been available about 2 years prior, but just on a DTC basis.
Mike, the founder and CEO, is a creative visionary of his own. You come in as VP of Creative. Can you talk about like what that world building looked like from a creative perspective?
Yeah, I mean, Mike, the brand really and the idea really came from his head. You know, he had the vision on it. He was the one that kind of had that idea you're talking about that was so simple, but no one had bothered to think of it yet. So I stepped into that seeing there was the tagline Murder Your Thirst, and we had this amazing logo, and there was so much work that had already been built. But to step into something that was really someone's pure vision, and then to have to try to understand what that means, and then not just take that baton and run with it, but like, you know, keep going. It was more difficult than I think I originally appreciated. But I think, 4 years later, hopefully I'm doing a pretty good job.
As a creative, it's like one thing to come into an operation where the CEO is functioning in more of like a traditional CEO capacity. And it's another thing to come in as like the head creative, but you've got this creative person above you. So what was that sort of learning curve for you as you tried to figure out, how do I get inside this guy's brain? And also, I would imagine you're like, I also got to like be true to my own creative sensibilities and I want to put my own stamp on this thing. Like, where do those two things meet?
Yeah, I think I've looked almost at this thing we're doing with Liquid Death almost from like a anthropological standpoint where the brand and the fandom and everything we're doing, it's more that it almost reveals itself over time than starting out with this like strict, rigid point of view of like, our brand talks like this. We say these words, but we don't say these words. That's really how brands are traditionally built, right? It's built in a very clinical way where you sit down and you decide these are the rules that govern our brand. And all that really becomes is that's sort of, it deletes what you can do as a brand. And so the amazing thing was I was stepping into something that, I mean, still from day one is we're building the ship as we're sailing it a bit. But that's the fun part of it because we can adjust to whatever opportunities we see in front of us, we can adjust and adapt. And so for me walking in where we don't have this brand book, we don't have any real codified sense of what it is, I think I kind of began to realize that that's actually the power of what we're doing. letting this thing really be organic. And to kind of what you said, I realized somewhat early on that if I could get, if he hears this, he'll be like, oh, that's what you're doing. If I could get inside Mike's head and understand his perspective on things, then I could start to understand what the brand was trying to do. And I think that's why Liquid Death feels so compelling to people, is because, again, it's not this like sterile thing that was conceived as like a hole in the market that we're going to fill with this one very engineered brand, right? It's sort of this amalgamation of like stuff that Mike likes and stuff that I like and stuff that other people in the marketing team and our sales team, and it's just sort of this combination of all these things that we're into. And that's what the brand is built on. So that's why we always get, brand as feeling authentic. And it's like, oh yeah, because it's built from a bunch of people who like stuff and have specific senses of humor and want to do interesting things. And so that's what guides the brand is sort of all the people behind it, and not this like PDF of all these rules that have been decided on somewhere else in a room somewhere.
Which is like pretty antithetical to creativity in
Right.
the end, right? Creativity
Right.
is like fundamentally about being in a sort of lawlessness.
Yes.
And
yeah. Especially nowadays, especially the way you look at the way brands and businesses have to operate on social media, you have to have something that can feel living and organic, right? And so when I first started, I was working with Mike. We would be working on something, and I would sit down and I'd like make a note to myself of like, oh, here's one of our rules. Here's something we believe or whatever. And my idea was I was going to build this brand book for my own sense, to kind of try to wrap my arms around what this thing was. And man, I worked on that thing for months, and I kept writing stuff down. And every time I'd look at it, I'd be like, I fucking hate this. And like every page, I was like, as soon as you put something that interesting down on paper and try to put it in a quippy little headline, it loses all the power and thing that makes it interesting. So I just kept looking at this document and getting angry every time as I'm trying to build this brand book. And so finally, I don't know, like 5 months in or so, I was just like, screw it. We're just not going to have it. We're just not going to have a brand book. And there was kind of this funny unlock for me that was an okay thing to do, because my kind of training had been that we have to have this guiding light. And then later on, that evolved into this realization that rather than being a brand, Liquid Death is kind of almost more of a character. And because we would write in these different tonalities that all came from the same place, but we would have different tones and different characters that we would write in, which is antithetical to like the way you ever build a brand, right? We have 2 logos we use on stuff. Like, you're not supposed to have a brand with 2 logos.
right, it's like totally against the
It's
rules.
like,
yeah.
that doesn't make any sense. But it was because that is, you're talking about like that kind of lawlessness, was it made sense to us, and it was more fun that way. So kind of in the same way, I realized that rather than trying to build this brand, we thought of it more like a character that just gets inserted in these different situations, meaning like, hey, we want to talk about iced tea, or like, hey, we're going to do a partnership with Elf Cosmetics, or whatever the scene is. If we were writers on a show, we would just write for what that character would do in that scene. And so you're not trying to figure out like what marketing thing we could do. We're just trying to answer the question, what would Liquid Death do? And so that was like a big unlock for me, that there's just a right answer. And I don't think that's like not something that's talked about in marketing. It's very subjective, and you can have opinions, and you like this thing and somebody else likes this thing. But we've started to understand that there's like a right answer for what we should do, or what Liquid Death would do. And so it just means we all can look at that and agree that that's the right answer. And it takes all the subjectivity and all this like personal inputs out of it, and that's what we're trying to find, that thing. And so that's how we can function much more quickly and efficiently, by just like answering the question, what would Liquid Death do?
It's fascinating to hear you say this, because it's like the screenwriting process.
Yeah.
Much more than it would be like the traditional like creative marketing process. It sounds like it like narrows the field for you. You're just like, oh yeah, well, what would this person do? Did you spend actual time sort of developing the idea of who this character is? Or was it something that you all just sort of like inherently understand?
Yeah, I think it's more that it revealed itself over time. Like I said, it's kind of, I honestly probably I couldn't give you like a set of like beliefs, or I probably couldn't succinctly do it. But to the same point, like describe your friend or yourself or describe another human being. Can you, and I don't want to get like super heady about it, but like imagine you had to describe all of a person to somebody else. It's really hard because people are really complex and have a lot of different motivations and different parts of them. So I think that's in the same way, because this brand or character or whatever is built from a bunch of people, a bunch of us, it has all these weird quirks to it and these different sides that we can show when we want, when it makes sense. It's sort of more just like, that person or that friend, and you can guess how your friend would do something in a situation. Or if you're in a writer's room, if you know the character, you know how they would react in a situation or what they would do, or sometimes they might surprise you and do something unexpected. Like that's the fun of watching a show, is when a character shows you something that makes total sense, but you didn't see coming because it's kind of part of them. And so we'll do a lot of stuff like that like a traditional brand would never allow itself to do, because again, it's working within these rigid rules and guidelines, and ours is much more organic in that way.
It's so fun to think about a brand as being a character. And also, I think so smart to think about it from the perspective that you were saying, like allowing also that character to be dimensional, right? And to not just be functioning in one capacity, because that's not how human beings function.
And also think about it this way. It's like if TV shows were inhabited by brands the way that we marketers generally write for brands, the shows would suck. No one would watch those shows because they would be completely one-dimensional and boring, and you would know what they would do every time. But we're humans, and we want to see interesting, flawed, weird people sometimes. And so I think it's just kind of showing that back to us a little bit.
You were talking about it taking the subjectivity out of things.
Yeah.
But you've also very much built your brand on comedy, which is like one of, I think, the most subjective things on the planet. Do you disagree?
I'm going to disagree there, because I think comedy is the least subjective thing, because comedy is based on two people looking at the same thing and agreeing that that's true. Like, I can't tell you a joke if we don't both agree that the subject matter and the conclusion that I'm coming to in that joke aren't true. That's why it floors me that more brands don't try to employ genuine humor, because it's the fastest way to actually reach somebody and have a really powerful moment with somebody. Laughter literally is an involuntary response to making a connection with somebody or something, right? And so I think like tastes obviously can be different, and there's some subjectivity in comedy, of course, but I think like the evolutionary origin of comedy is super objective in a way.
Why don't you think more brands employ comedy?
It's hard. It's scary.
It's scary.
And it necessitates a lot of putting yourself out there and trying things. And I think that's another part of the way that we work is we're trying out stuff constantly. We're almost in the same way that a stand-up is getting up on stage and workshopping new material in front of an audience. We're just kind of doing that on our social feed constantly, right? A lot of brands will take work and then they'll pre-test it, and then it goes into focus groups, and it just kind of automatically gets watered down and the edges rounded off. And the way that we approach, we are scientific in some respects, but it happens after, because the best testing you can do is try something, put it out in the world, and see how people react. Trying something theoretical humor doesn't work. But if you can try something in practice, try it, see how people react to it, and then we take all that stuff back. And now we learned a little bit of something for the next time we're going to go out and do something. And so we're just trying to do a lot of stuff as quickly and cheaply as possible to test things out and to kind of hedge our bets on what might work and what might not. But that's, again, not the way that a traditional marketing department or ad agency might work, right? They would work on these huge integrated campaigns for months at a time, dump millions of dollars into it, spend months developing it, and then you're like, here it is. Hope it works for the next 4 months for us. I've done that. My background is I was at ad agencies for years. And I remember shooting something and then getting into the edit bay and being like, oh no, this isn't good.
Yeah.
And we sold them on this, and this cost a lot of money, and we have to live with this for, the season or whatever it is. And so this is, again, like the opposite of that thinking, where let's rapidly let's almost prototype ideas live and then see how they work out.
I think that they're just like, we don't know how you guys keep on doing this year after year, because everybody else, they just come and it's a 6-month run, and if it doesn't go viral any longer, they'll close it down, and that will be the end of the product. So that was kind of a good moment for us. We were like, oh wow, thank you. We're excited that we've been able to differentiate ourselves and keep people coming back for more. So
Yeah, you've come a long way since that initial 30, 40,000 masks landing here. I do want to get an understanding of, like, now that you have the product, you're happy with it, how did you get customers and launch this thing?
So I think, like many other entrepreneurs, we launched to family and friends, which is crickets, basically. You get a few, a couple of people are like, oh, I'll help them out and place an order. And I think both of us were first-time entrepreneurs, and neither of us were marketers. And so, we're bootstrapping. We didn't have the budget to be spending tens of thousands of dollars on Facebook ads. And then one day we had a friend, one of our family and friends, email friends, reach out and say, I want to do PR for you guys. And so she was at an agency at the time and loved the idea behind the brand. And so she gave us a great rate because she was a friend. And that was our publicist for the first 2 or 3 years. So we, from day one, have had consistent PR. And I think for a lot of startup entrepreneurs, they're looking at the cost of doing PR, right? And it is like a daunting amount of money, especially to think about doing a long term. And what I realized too is PR is not a thing where you can turn it on and in 3 months you're like in all these magazines, right? It really is a long-term commitment, and it has to be for the right product has the potential for people to want to talk about it in press. So for us, that's really been one of our first ways of getting a brand out there. And so in the beginning, she started doing things like gifting celebrities, right? And I think ultimately that's how Nick Jonas found out about the brand, was because he'd received a gift and loved the product enough to make it part of his daily routine. And I think another big moment for us that drove both customers to purchase product, but also drove inbound retail was, I would say 6 months in, we were interviewed by the Wall Street Journal for a broader piece. It wasn't about us. It was about just men doing sheet masks in general.
I think it was about men being, not only are they doing skincare, but now they're doing sheet masks. Like, this is unbelievable.
How outrageous that men are also doing sheet masks. It was like, this is 2018, I think. It was like unthinkable, right? That gave us a good amount of exposure as well. And from then on, I think it was just, we do, I think, similar things to what most other brands do, which is, you have to do the ads, and we do the email marketing, SMS marketing, all these things that we built on over time. But I think having that initial exposure to a large number of people that we couldn't have gotten with our own budget was really helpful.
And we also can't forget the micro-influencers, right?
Yes.
So at the very beginning, when we started, sheet masks were definitely trending in America at the time. So there was a moment in time where sheet masks were a big thing. There were people that were reviewing a different sheet mask every single day. And so that was their thing. Like, they would do a new sheet mask every day. And, there weren't any sheet masks designed with men in mind. And so we contacted all of these micro-influencers and said, hey, would you like to try this? And they'd be like, yeah, sure, I can't wait to tear this apart, because they're really difficult, in terms of they give ratings and all this type of system. And then they, got it and put it on. And I think they were like, wait a second, this is a legit sheet mask. This is, if not the best one I've used, you know what I mean? And so a lot of the writers that are writing for magazines were actually following some of these micro-influencers. And then they would reach out to our publicist or to our team directly and just be like, hey, I just saw, this review about the sheet mask. Can you please send me one? I'd love to try it. And sort of it grew from there.
When we were chatting earlier, we were talking about the both of you working on this business and also being parents together. And I love the fact that you said it's work-life mix instead of balance. Yeah, talk to us about that philosophy.
So this is actually a topic that's very near and dear to me, because as a female founder with kids and that's married, it's really, I think there's this idea in the last few years where you can be a girl boss, you can do it all and have all this stuff. And ultimately you can't. I mean, you can do it all, but you can't. My experience is that you cannot do it all extremely well because there's just not enough time in the day. And so for us, I don't believe that you can have something that's truly work-life balance, but that you kind of have to mix them together, right? And I think I mentioned this to you back when I was in my corporate job at Google. I attended a lunch and learn with our CFO, Ruth Pratt, at the time. And it's a question I asked her because she's so successful and she's 3 kids. So I said, how do you do it all? How did you become the super successful person with these three kids? And so she said it's work-life mix, right? So you're at the soccer games, you're doing all this stuff, but you're working at the same time. And so I know it's not ideal, but that's the reality that we sort of live in is, you can't expect that you're gonna be at 100% on everything that you do.
Like we were driving up here with the kids today, and because we dropped them off at my parents' house, but they were asking Jen questions. I was driving and Jen was working on her phone. You know what I mean? And we even said like, oh, it's so great that, we have phones now where we can do this. But we sort of have to say, hey guys, mom's working right now. Like we got to, take a minute to get through this. And, it is tough. And I would say there is a benefit to us being married too, in the sense that we are able to constantly, come up with ideas and test things. And, I was just testing new products this week. And so we're just literally in the same house testing these products. And it's like we can cut through so much of the red tape back and forth. We need to set up a meeting to discuss this product and all this type of thing. And then, of course, when we go to meet our retailer or our manufacturers in Korea and all that type of thing, we are traveling as a husband and wife. And, we can have some fun at dinners too and different things together. So, yeah.
Our vision has always been to be a one-stop shop for all of your wedding party needs. We started with bridesmaids dresses. We stayed hyper-focused on bridesmaids dresses for a really long time. We've expanded into other categories, and now we are tackling groomsmen.
Well, and as you know, this program is for the current and aspiring entrepreneur. And I don't know, from where I'm sitting, that's a big change from a bridesmaid dress to groomsmen, to suits, to ties, to everything else that goes along with that. How did you determine what category to go into?
So it's interesting. It happened very organically. First and foremost, I think it's really important for any aspiring entrepreneur to really focus on their core product, work at it, become famous for it, really become sort of, the owner of that product, and then start expanding into other categories. And so for a very long time, we're 7.5 years in, and we're now just starting to sort of really expand into groomsmen. But it happened organically. We were approached by a partner to drop ship suits a couple years ago. And we said, why not? I mean, it really makes sense because you have the bride who is the primary decision maker on not only the bridesmaids dresses, but has heavy influence over the color of the groomsmen suits.
I would say more than heavy influence.
Yeah, exactly. Sequentially, the decision is made where she chooses the bridesmaids dresses first and then the groomsmen suits. And so we shot suits next to our bridesmaids dresses, and a lot of brides found it to be really helpful. And, when you're a bride planning your wedding, you have so many decisions to make. It's very, very stressful. And so we wanted to take the stress out of it and make it really easy for her to find everything for her wedding party in one destination. And so we're launching Birdy Grey suits this spring, and I'm so excited and so proud. Like I said, we were drop shipping suits, and the business really took off. And so it made sense for us to really, launch our own line.
Which is remarkable. And you're doing that with us on Shopify, which I think is also rather cool. I mean, what is it about Shopify that allows your business not only to facilitate that growth, but also to expand beyond, as you mentioned, your bread and butter, the product that really set you apart from your competitors?
Yeah, Shopify is so great. 7.5 years ago, I was sitting in my living room by myself, building a website and launching a brand. And, fast forward to now, we are a $100 million business, which is remarkable. The suits business will also launch on Shopify, and it'll be a very seamless sort of UX experience where you can toggle between both the core site and the suit site. So, going back to the bride being the decision maker, she's really thinking about the colors and, coordinating the bridal party. But it's really groomsmen who are coming by to actually purchase the suits. And so we knew that we had to tailor the experience to both the bride who's making the decision and to the groomsmen who are the end sort of purchaser. And so the site experience feels very seamless, but if you're shopping dresses on our site, it's very tailored to a dress experience. The groom's experience is completely different. We have a heavy focus on like all the tailoring touches, what makes the suit so great, what makes it so versatile. Guys prefer a really easy shopping experience, like the less noise, the better. So we really pulled back. It's very clean and it's very easy.
Maybe perhaps folks who are listening or watching right now haven't thought about it in that way, like how you have to tailor your sites based off of your customer base, right?
Absolutely.
Are you doing the same thing with your marketing?
Yes. So from a marketing perspective, we are acquiring the same person who's the decision maker, the bride. When we think about it from a marketing perspective, we're acquiring our brides to choose their bridesmaids dresses, and then the groomsmen business is just building her basket or growing that AOV.
It's still the bride that is the primary customer.
She is the primary decision maker.
Decision maker, okay.
Yes. What's great about our marketing model is that it's a one-to-many. In traditional retail, it's one-to-one. You acquire a customer and she comes back, makes multiple purchases. For us, we think about the LTV of a bridal party. And so, expanding into groomsmen, knowing that the bride who we've already acquired as a decision maker made sense.
And for our audience, LTV, lifetime value is what you're referring to. Let's get back now to diversification and your advice as someone who's done this successfully. What would you say to someone who has a hero product?
Mm-hmm.
They're looking to diversify. How should they determine which product to choose, specifically in clothing?
Yeah, that's a really great question. You have to really understand the shopping journey of your customers. So for us, brides are who we acquire, bridesmaids are who are purchasing. And so when we think about category expansion, we think about, okay, what else can we sell the bride? And for us, that's bridesmaids gifts that she's buying in not 1-to-1, but sets of 1-to-5, right? 5 gifts for every bridal party. The average bridal party size is about 5 people. So what else can we sell the bride? And then we have, complete the look sort of accessories for bridesmaids. So, what can we cross-sell with her bridesmaid's dress? That means shapewear to wear underneath, shoes, jewelry. For the bride, gifting is really big. So we have a really large getting ready category. We have jewelry that she buys 50% of the time as gifts, and then little white dresses that she can purchase for her various bridal events, whether it's the bridal shower, the bachelorette party, or, like a third look for the wedding reception.
Or when you're dancing later that evening, right?
Exactly. And so for groomsmen, it's the same thing. We have suits that we're launching, but we also have accessories that he'll need to complete the look, especially with a tuxedo. We have an incredibly sharp tuxedo that we're launching. We also have suspenders to cross-sell, cufflinks, the shirt, all of it.
Vietnamese coffee has this chocolatey, nutty, super robust taste that's going to be completely mainstream, especially once we're able to put some care into it to make it specialty. I think that what has been challenging was just trying to convince people that this could be a mass market thing. And so for 2 years, I bootstrapped the company until literally Walmart called me. Walmart called me and said, we are really interested in you coming to Arkansas and to tell us about your product line. They were finding that Asian-inspired flavors and Asian-inspired high-end products were performing really, really well in their stores and with the customers that they were really trying to woo into their doors. And that was when everything kind of changed. We immediately got into 300 Walmarts within the first 2 years of the company. And that's when it was really clear that, no investor can say this is going to be too niche if Walmart is literally calling you to come on their shelves.
Yeah, what an amazing moment to have a retailer support you and open doors to investors as well, because you've had such a long investing journey. I know that in 2021, you closed Series A with $8.5 million, which is such a remarkable feat in this climate with investing. Throughout all the rounds, you had to convince so many people to take a chance. I guess, what is your advice for founders who are in the direct-to-consumer space, in consumer packaged goods space right now, that's having a bit of a hard time to share their story and get buy-in?
The thing that I always come back to whenever people are telling me no, and I really believe in something, is I always try to think about how can I make this undeniable. I remember going and talking to investors and them just being like, I like it, but they'd say that this was wrong or that was wrong. And I think that you begin to say, what is a number or a thing that can just completely kind of, quiet any type of concern that someone would have. And that would always be kind of the North Star. And because that was the thing that I repeatedly got was that this is too niche. This is too niche. This is going to be too small of a product line, too small of an audience. And to say, what is the proof point? And I remember when Walmart called, I did have some of my peers say, well, Walmart is low end. You can't go into Walmart. You're a premium. At the same time, we were in Neiman Marcus and Nordstrom's and all these really premium places. And nobody cared because I was saying that we're not going into Walmart because we're going to be low end. Walmart is trying to be high end, and that's why they're bringing brands like us in. And that's really the thesis that we were able to bring forward around where the brand was going to go and the potential of how big it could get. And I think that just what are the numbers that you can show? What is the traction that you can show to just make something completely undeniable and to think about what kind of resources you can have towards that? That's always what I've come back to because I think that you just can't make someone see something unless you prove it yourself.
Yeah, and I think the customer interest really speaks for you as well. From I guess the customer acquisition side, has strategy changed over the years? Because the proof point is that there's so many people interested in cow per cow, and that's why there's retailer interest and there's investor interest as well.
Our acquisition or customer awareness strategy is literally changing every day. I mean, it's changed so much over the course of the company. When I first started, it was literally going to, farmers markets and craft fairs and just trying to get feedback about what people thought. And then eventually we were able to afford, meta ads. And that's when it felt like kind of everything changed during kind of the heyday of being able to really find customers through those platforms. And then now today, I think it's definitely much more about storytelling and it's about word of mouth. And I think that it's about just having the best product at the best price on shelf. And that's going to be what is going to drive people to want to try something more than anything, is that they're going to hear that it's great and they're going to see a great price point and they're going to see a beautiful package and they're going to be interested in trying it. For years, we were able to kind of grow our pour over and our creamer strategy through direct to consumer because the visuals were so unique and it was so eye-catching. Through the ground coffee, where it's really hard to understand visually what's the difference between your ground coffee and someone else's, it's been word of mouth that has driven it to be now 50% of our business today.
That's incredible because that's also your intuition and also following the feedback of customers to expand into new product lines and really grow with where your customer wants the business to be. To your point, expanding out of the latte kind of setup, the pour-over setup, the creamers to now ground coffee. Has there been just like customer feedback and other processes that have really helped you to be closer to the customer?
Yeah. I mean, I think that no matter how big your direct-to-consumer business is, it is so valuable. You have all the contact information. You know exactly where someone lives. You know what product they bought. It is like such a treasure trove of information. And so something that we've always done is we call our customers or we ask them if they're willing to be recorded on an interview. And people are always so excited to be part of a brand that way. And so what made us actually to launch the ground coffee line is that we had interviews with customers. We would look at, okay, let's just like call a random, 20 customers that had bought a certain type of product mix. And we would ask them, okay, so what do you like the product? And it would have like, we had a crazy NPS score. We have like an Apple NPS score. So we're like, so why did you only buy the coffee twice this year? If you love it so much, if you say it's your favorite coffee, people would even say, and they were like, well, it's my special occasion coffee. It's the coffee I drink when I like go and visit somebody. It's the gift I give, or it's something that I drink when I go have a coffee date with a coworker. It's something that we were realizing was someone's like travel coffee or at best Saturday coffee. And we're like, all the work that we're doing in Vietnam, all the work that we're doing around putting real flavors into coffee, this stuff that's innovation for your everyday cup is being really kind of held back by the format. And so as much as the format was kind of, to be honest, like an acquisition like juggernaut, and that like, it does really well in ads because people are just so entranced by a unique new coffee product. But really, you want the coffee to sing because that's actually what we're really about and what we've spent the most time innovating on. And so that was when we decided, well, how can we become more of an everyday coffee? And it's been a really long journey. It took a while for our existing customers to kind of take hold of it. We've been national with Whole Foods with the pour over line for the last 4 years. And as soon as we got the ground coffee on shelves, it had like triple the velocity. So it just really showcased, and not only that, but you really see it build over time. Like as you do promotions, as you're able to kind of get new customers, you see that those people are the ones who are probably buying it once or twice a month, which is the kind of customer that you want to have.
Yeah, you really increase the lifetime value of customers because now this is a everyday ritual instead of a special occasion ritual.
Yes. It's like an incredibly high percentage of our subscription today, for example, and how that's really important about how do you please that customer and what I always call like, how do we get more of the share of their coffee wallet? Because, we all spend a lot on coffee more than ever today. And so how do you really kind of win over that customer to be their everyday coffee is what we're after today.
And on the flip side, in addition to building those investor relationships, retail relationships, customer acquisition, you're also building so many incredible relationships with farmers in Vietnam and actually setting up a great system for them to grow with you. What were some of the challenges you were facing in the early days to build on those relationships?
In the very beginning, I remember it being really challenging because obviously I'm not a farmer, but I knew enough to maybe be a little bit dangerous. But I also especially knew some of the things that just had to be eliminated for how they were practicing. You know, the overuse of pesticides and for chemical fertilizers was a very important thing, but also in just the way that they would pick cherries from coffee was something that was very clear needed to be changed. They would just, as soon as the cherry would get to a certain size, they would pick it. And if you just wait until there's a certain sugar level in the cherry, which is not hard to measure, and it doesn't take that much longer to wait for. These like really small things that were different that we were able to introduce at the farm level completely changed the flavor of coffee that we were getting out of it. And it was challenging in the beginning because I'm trying to talk to these farmers and, you know, I'm not a farmer. I don't even speak Vietnamese fluently. And I'm going through a translator. And a lot of people are like, well, my family has farmed for generations. Why are you telling me that we're doing something wrong? But the conversation really, really changes quickly when you just want to spend time with them, when you're curious about what they do, you're curious about how they've been able to improve their farms. And then most importantly, you're able to talk to them about the economic opportunity of the changes. I'm not just telling them that I want them to do it differently and that they're going to get the same. I'm like, no, I'll pay you twice market rates, which nobody's doing in Vietnam at that time. And we came back the next year and we bought all of the coffee. And the next year we came back and we encouraged the co-op to expand further into the standards that we had. And we were able to buy more and more every year. And now we've got a really great reputation with farmers. And they're really, they want to listen. They want to talk. They want to hear about how they can have access to better markets. And I think that that's where, when I think about sustainability, yes, of course, it's the amount of pesticides and herbicides and things that we're working really hard on, but it's also about following through on like a business relationship and having that trust. Yeah. And that's really what makes things sustainable and makes people want to improve, because we looked into doing fair trade in Vietnam and it was absolutely impossible because fair trade came in a really big way about 10 years ago into Vietnam and convinced everybody to pay all of these additional fees, do additional paperwork to be fair trade qualified. And because Vietnam just wasn't really premium enough, nobody came and bought the coffee. No one was willing to pay. They were like, oh, I don't even pay the 5% extra for fair trade. I'm going to just go to the farm next door who didn't pay for that. Yeah. And they got burned really bad. And we found that it was really impossible for us to go in that direction. And that's why we decided that, you know, let's just skip over to our end goal, which is actually organic. Yeah. And it's been really incredible to build those relationships and how excited that our co-ops have been and our farmers have been to dive into that. And they're really aware of how much this is going to affect their lives too. And I think that that's been a really big lesson for us, is that we're launching our first organic product and we're just going to do one, because we don't want to overpromise and convert the whole entire line. And then if something happens, we don't want to like ruin the trust with these farmers. So we're saying, what's the exact amount that we know for sure, no matter what, we're going to be able to buy, and then next year and the next year and the next year, and to build that trust in a much more impactful way through organic.
Yeah. Even for the certification process, there is such a hurdle for farmers due to language, bureaucracy, and cost. So the fact that you are helping them to be certified organic for certain lines is a huge win that they can unlock for future as well. So it's really incredible.
Yeah.
I know that you spent most of your time in California running this business, and you also spent a lot of time in Vietnam. How are you juggling everything, trying to run the business, scale it, grow it?
I guess I'm juggling with my hands and feet is like how it feels on a day-to-day basis. I have 2 small kids. I've got a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And, you know, before I had kids, it would be so easy to just like hop on a plane and spend 3 weeks over there. And that's become increasingly harder and harder to do with kids. And so what we've been able to do is do something that's kind of like a little bit of like a hybrid, where for the last 2 years, I've spent about 2 months a year in Vietnam. And it's ended up being this like pretty special work and life experience where my husband works at the company too. He's been working full-time at the company for 4 years. And so we go out to Vietnam together. We bring our kids. My mom comes, and it was really special because my mom and I went to the country when I was first thinking about starting Copper Cow in 2016. And it was even such a different place then than it is now. And, you know, we went and we just kind of, she's from the city center of Saigon. And I think we just kind of did some touristy stuff. And over the last, 8 years, I've gotten to know this totally different side of Vietnam. There's so much going on culturally. There's so much amazing stuff. There's this incredibly large, thriving middle class, and how it's such a different place than the way my mom remembers it. Having the opportunity to go there for 2 months with her, and for the first time in 2023 and then again in 2024, and to be able to show her just the way, I mean, she's just like, oh my gosh, it's like Gelson's, but Vietnamese, She's like so excited about all of the ways that Vietnamese people are living and thriving, as their economy has been, the fastest developing economy for almost 15 years now. And so we go there, we land, we hire a nanny, and we're able to just kind of sprint and work there for 2 months and be able to get so much done, which is the way that we've been able to create the operation and the relationships that we have in Vietnam, even though it's a lot harder for me to juggle between LA and Vietnam. And I think it's been a lot of work, but I think it's been a really incredible life experience. And my 4-year-old son talks about Vietnam all the time, and he loves it. And, he speaks a little bit of Vietnamese from that time there even, which is really fun to hear. And I think that it's a really cool way to be kind of raising my kids.
You mentioned that Vietnam is one of the fastest growing economies, but you're also a part of that change, right? Your business is literally providing the livelihood of so many families. And then also on the flip side, you come to California, you can go into Whole Foods and Erewhon and see your product. Yeah, how does that feel to see the impact of your idea in real life?
I think something that's a challenge or a curse of being an entrepreneur is I feel like, like if you had told me, like 8 years ago that this is what would happen, I'd be like, are you kidding? That's like, it's going to be in Erewhon, it's going to be in Whole Foods, it's going to be in Target, and you're going to be able to certify organic. You're going to do all this work. I would just be so excited. But something that I feel like that keeps happening when you have a mission or an impact orientation with your company or with what you're doing, everything always takes longer than you think it would, is one thing. But then also, as that happens, the vision of what you think is possible for the impact gets bigger too. I'm 8 years in and I just feel like the bar has moved so much further. I see Vietnam being this incredible solution to like the coffee crisis that we're in right now. Coffee prices across the world have been double for almost a year now. And any coffee drinker is feeling that when they're walking into a coffee shop or looking at like their bag of beans being much more expensive. And Arabica coffee, which is primarily what America drinks today, is getting harder and harder to grow. And Robusta coffee, which is what Vietnam specializes in, is much more climate resilient, which requires much less water, much less labor, and it's going to be a big solution for you to have an amazing cup of coffee at an affordable price. And so I think just the ambition of what that's going to be and what that impact is going to be to the market feels so much more exciting than what I had even set out to do in the beginning. I had no idea what it would be like to actually convert the farms organically, and to see how much they thrive in those environments compared to Arabica has been really, really exciting.
Everything in my closet just didn't feel like it was made for my body. Like my wife would put on clothing and it looked amazing on her. Everything was fitted perfectly, it looked right, and it was built for her. And then I'm looking at my closet and I'm just thinking like, why are guys an afterthought? Why are we just neglected on this front? And so the deeper I went on it, the more kind of excited I got about the opportunity. Because at first I didn't think it was really even something I wanted to do. But the more I dug and I looked at the competitors and I looked at the offerings, the more I realized what an enormous white space this is.
Your story is so relatable because it wasn't like you had spent your whole life building to this moment. You had a whole other career. We just talked about this offline, a whole other career in audio design. You were interested in music. And here you are opening your closet, seeing an opportunity. How did you link aha moments to business? Because that is maybe where I think folks who are watching or listening might be like, okay, cool, you saw the idea. What did you do about it?
Well, I didn't know in the beginning that it was really going to be something unbelievable. I was really setting up to be like a side project. And let's just kind of see what happens. I'm not going to put a lot of money into it. I'm just going to try my best, create an offering, and see what the market takes. And so originally it was just, let me put together a silhouette. Let me build a tech pack. Let me try to figure this out myself. Because I was running an agency before True Classic, which helped build a lot of my digital marketing skills, which paid massive dividends after I started it. But I would say that I knew very early on that like I'm not the apparel guy. I knew what I wanted and I knew how I wanted it to look, but I needed a guy that could bring my vision to life. And that was Nick, one of my co-founders, who really helped talk to the manufacturers and figure that portion of the business out. And without him, and also without my other co-founder, Matt, who had a relationship with a manufacturer, this thing would have taken a lot more money to get off the ground. So that really helped us stay bootstrapped, which was, a great thing in hindsight because we didn't need to raise any money. We weren't digging ourselves in a bunch of debt. We definitely had some credit card debt early on. We definitely negotiated lines with our manufacturers, which helped us, again, not have to raise money. But we were super smart about how we allocated the dollars and how we drove the business. And a lot of that came from just my previous knowledge of running paid media and knowing how to wield the dollars correctly and not just burn through cash.
So we're going to get to your comfortability, so to speak, with debt, what you ended up doing a little bit later in the interview. But before we continue there, just to take a quick step back to the beginning of this business, you started the brand basically outside of your own intellectual capital with $3,000.
Yes.
That's all it took. What did you spend that money on, and why was that enough to get started?
Part of it went into building the shirt. So when you're dealing with manufacturers, especially in the beginning, they're not going to front your samples, right? Like now they just eat the cost because we're big. But in the beginning, it was like, it's going to cost, $800 to build a shirt sample because there's going to be iterations. You're going to have to go back and forth with them and figure all that out. So it was probably like $800 to $1,000 in building what you call a tech pack, which is like the design of the shirt and the specs and everything. And then the other $2,000 went into Facebook ads. And I didn't need anything else because I already knew, I didn't have to hire anybody because I was just going to do all the work.
Because you had this expertise already.
Exactly. Yeah. So I saved all the money in the beginning, just doing everything myself. I wouldn't have been able to do that, obviously, without putting in the work beforehand. So it wasn't just like $3,000 miraculously built this big company. It was just like I had the knowledge going into it, which saved me a fortune in the beginning. Facebook, early days, 2019, pre-iOS 14, this was back when we had all the data and no one was opting out of anything just yet, right. Which it became a much harder game after that.
For sure.
So this was pre-iOS 14.
We have much less visibility when it comes to marketing.
100%. It's way more difficult. And now it's more about just making great creative. But back then, you could target very, very specific demos. And so I had a lot of that going for me in the early days. But I also just knew how to hack Facebook ads. I knew how to flip the money, spend $25, make $50, and so on and so on. So we started out, spend $50 a day, make $100 or $300. It was in the early days. Everything was like 3 or 4 to 1. It was really amazing ROAS early on. And then as you scaled up, like very quickly within a few weeks, I was spending $150 a day and then $200 a day. And as long as the ROAS was somewhere between 2 to 3 to 1 on what I was spending, we were profitable. And we were using a little simple BI program to kind of measure the profitability of the company. But just really staying honed in on that ROAS on Facebook was the whole game in the beginning. And even today, it drives a significant amount of our profitability.
I was going to ask you if it still does.
Absolutely. I mean, today it's like a blended ROAS across everything.
And just really quickly, for our audience, ROAS, return on ad spend is what you're saying.
Return on ad spend, but more specifically, new customer ROAS is like what we look at now more than anything. So we get even more granular because repeat, you just don't even really care about focusing on, getting people to convert on Facebook because they're going to convert anyway, right? They're going to convert on email, SMS, just coming back to the website whenever they need stuff. It's really about figuring out how to get in front of new customers.
Top of the funnel.
Exactly. So that's where the ROAS really meets the road as far as that's concerned for us now. That number is like laser focused every single day. Like when I wake up and I open up Triple Whale and I look at our dashboards, NC ROAS is like my number one metric. And if it's like 0.7, we way overspent this morning. Things aren't looking good. What happened? What do we got to do? If I wake up and it's like 1.5, we're like, wow, today's going to be wildly profitable. Like, I don't know what happened yet. I'll figure it out as the day goes on. But that is kind of our North Star metric right now.
And you are still, it sounds like, actively involved in the monitoring of your return on ad spend on your ROAS, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be because there's just so many components to it. So much of it is driven by just how great is the creative, what's working, what's not, video versus statics. Like right now, I'm finding that statics are just crushing. It's very kind of old school thinking, but like,
and what do you mean by statics, just for our audience?
Static images. Like basically just a picture of a shirt. Not even like a lifestyle or an editorial. Like actually just a generic picture of a shirt on a static, but it'll have like the review count and it'll say like 3,000, 4.5 reviews, which allows people to connect the dots and go, oh, this should mean something. Like clearly a lot of people are buying this. I should go check it out. And it works really well still to this day. It's not all about video.
Well, speaking of video, let's be real. Some of your creative is just hilarious. It's engaging. You're in many of these ads as well. What is it about having great creative? And if you could break down the DNA, so to speak, of a great ad.
A great ad can't feel like an ad. That's kind of like 101 marketing. Like it needs to feel real. It needs to feel like you're not overselling. What I learned early on was like, whatever we do marketing wise, I want it to be super authentic. And I think if we're living by the look good, feel good mantra of True Classic, if we can make the ad allow them to feel good, then that's the best version of an ad that I want for the customer, because that's how you create a true emotional connection with people. And at the end of the day, that's all you can ask for. And the way that you do that is through comedy. And comedy is the ultimate equalizer. And it's also the only form of ad that people are really going to share at scale. People will share wholesome content and they share comedy. I just knew that like, if we're going to show up for customers at a 10 out of 10 in every single department of this business, for specifically ads, I want it to be a feel-good component. And so that was really how we thought about it. And now today, obviously, there is portions of the comedy that speak about the product that you have to have something in there about the product, right? It can't just be comedy for comedy's sake. We've tried that too, and that just doesn't really net out, because if you're not selling anything, it's like the ROAS isn't going to reflect the sales.
Yeah,
so
hey, hilarious video, but nothing to buy.
For what?
Yeah.
Exactly. So we do try to incorporate some value prop conversation within the scripts, but it's just a lot of fun. I mean, we have really talented people. We have like Nicholas does a lot of our script writing and producing and directing. We have Greg and Nate out of Philly that crush it for us on the comedy ads. So I'm lucky to be surrounded by really talented, smart, capable people who just produce great assets.
And this goes back to one of the self-proclaimed mantras that I put on you at the beginning of this interview, which is find smart people. Clearly, you've been effective with that. You've been talking about them throughout this interview, who you leverage, but also leveraging your own strengths here as well. You really have bet on yourself. And that can be very daunting for some folks, right? To take a big risk, to bet on yourself, to have that confidence. Is that something that you can learn? Is that something that's innate to you? How do you bet on yourself in an effective way if you're starting a business?
I got really lucky with that in the fact that I had great parents. I had really great parents that really built up my self-esteem and did it right. And I was an only child, so that I'm sure that helped as well. Anything I wanted to do, they were behind me and they were super supportive and they just wanted the best for me. So like when people talk about luck, I always attribute most of my luck to just that. Like I was just lucky to grow up in a great house with great parents who drove my self-esteem and did anything that I wanted to try music-wise. Like I got into drums, they got me a drum set. I got into piano, they got me a piano. Like it was just, they were really trying to mold me into the best version of myself. So if I'm someone, and let's say I don't have a great upbringing, what I'm just doubling down on is trying a lot of different things until I find what I'm great at. And it's not always so obvious on the surface. I think you just have to get used to trying and failing until something clicks and everyone just starts saying around you, like, wow, you're really good at that. You should think about like a career in that. Ironically, I led myself down a huge line of debt in music doing that. But it paid off because, obviously I over-indexed on creative massively with True Classic. And that's to no surprise because I started out in creative. So I just care so much that it's great that you see it now in the company. So it did play a part later.
I actually love food. I think it has such a special place and close place in our heart, which is very similar to beauty. Then I took a role at Kendo, which was a division of Sephora at the time, really working on their white space brands that are sold within Sephora. Wow. Then I joined Sundial, makers of Shea Moisture.
Oh my goodness.
Pre-acquisition of Unilever. And then Coty. So this is like, 2018, 2017. I realized that I had built brands for other people and it was time for me to build one for myself. And so Undefined was born. And it really was looking across the industry and recognizing that there was a couple things missing. And for me, it was really courage and the authenticity to do something different. And so I built Undefined in a very undefined way.
Love it.
So solo founder, I don't have any employees, self-funded. So I don't have, deep VC backing to like really invest in growth. But I also operate under what I call conscious capitalism. So all my suppliers are female founded, minority owned, LGBTQ and small business, because I'm a strong believer that business empowers business. Yes. And so I've taken a very different approach to growing Undefined. It's really been like slow and steady wins the race. And doing it in a very organic way. So really focusing on building a community first, listening to my community as I develop products. And yeah, this year is going to be my 7th year in business.
Yeah,
more than 7 which I mean, in entrepreneurship, that's like 20 years. But yeah, it's been a fun ride. I've definitely learned a lot along the way, but using a lot of the, I guess we'll call it like the mosaic of experiences that I had previously to help me really, develop, grow, and build Undefined.
It's an amazing career. And I feel like the way that you talk about Undefined's business structure is so unique. And I know that when you were launching, you're also thinking about how to differentiate the products as well. Mm-hmm. So what were you doing when you're thinking about differentiation in such a crowded industry?
Yeah. So if we go back to 2018, which Undefined was founded, it was a very different place then. Also, the products themselves were very different. So back when I started, the focus was on the beautiful plant wisdom and plant magic of CBD. So I don't know if you remember like the whole green rush with CBD. And so the products were like CBD infused, which I thought that was a great differentiator. Like I believe in the plant wisdom. It's very anti-inflammatory and all the good things. But unfortunately, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze in terms of the regulatory, aspect of having a CBD brand. Mm-hmm. And so after a couple of years, I was meeting like buyers and they're like, we love you. We love what you stand for. We don't love CBD. And it was actually Target, like a buyer that I met at Target that was like, well, have you thought about just creating the products without CBD in them? Which I didn't do because I felt that I really wanted them to live together synergistically. But ultimately, launched the R&R collection, which was like still having this, umbrella concept of plant wisdom and plant magic, just not with any unregulated gray area ingredients. Yeah. And so the R&R collection was really focused on adaptogenic mushrooms. So instead of CBD, it was the plant power of mushrooms. And that's what's unlocked a lot of retail growth and just growth for the brand overall, was really taking that pivot away from CBD into other plant wisdom.
Yeah. And I love that you got the feedback from the buyer at Target and really reassessed the business and pivoted. I feel like that is such great advice you otherwise wouldn't have get if you didn't launch. So are there any other kind of nuggets of wisdom you picked up along the way that you feel like new founders can think about when they're trying to enter into an established industry?
Yeah. So as a perfectionist, I feel like a lot of times people get in their own way. Yeah. And so as I, mentor and guide other entrepreneurs, I tell them you have to jump off the cliff and build your wings on the way down. Let the market tell you, what's right and what's wrong, as opposed to trying to overanalyze and analysis paralysis products. Really let the market tell you. And so I'm an advocate of throw something out there, see what sticks, and evolve and pivot. So even some of my products, they've been reformulated, because I'm always listening and optimizing and tinkering behind the scenes, really with the goal of creating these, plant-powered, results-driven products that perform but don't cost your firstborn child, because economic inclusivity is really core to the brand. And so I have kind of like 4 pillars that I use as I think about developing products as well as just growing the business. So it's clean. So clinical, meaning that I pair ancient plant wisdom with clinically proven actives, so you're not compromising on performance. The second pillar is conscious, which is the conscious capitalism element that I mentioned. Inclusive is the third. And for me, inclusivity goes, deeper than the color of your skin. It's really about bringing people into the conversation that have been historically left out, either because they don't know where to start, so there's an information gap that I'm solving for, or they can't afford it, so there's an economic gap. As you see, like the products have diverse illustrations, which is really important to me because representation matters, especially now in the current society that we're living in. And I'm a strong believer that seeing is believing is becoming. So when someone sees the diverse representation on shelf at Target, they'll feel seen. And I hopefully think it's empowering kind of the next phase of entrepreneurs to really be thoughtful in how they think about inclusivity and not just have it be this performative action. For me, it's about like bringing it into the fold. And it's not just racial inclusivity. So like age inclusivity is also important, sexual orientation inclusivity. So it's all of the aspects and being very thoughtful both in how I'm developing products and how they can be inclusive, but also how I, market those products. And then the fourth pillar is plant magic. And so that's, the mushrooms and all of the ingredients that are in the products, they have to like ladder back to that end benefit. It's not just about throwing in some plants for the sake of plants. It's like, what is this product going to do? How can I create or find a beautiful, plant-based ingredient that's going to reinforce that benefit? So like, for example, the Sun Elixir. It's a SPF glow oil that has like vitamin C and it's got a bunch of brighteners. And so I included amla, which is a beautiful ingredient that's been used across Ayurvedic and Indian wisdom for years because it's a brightener. And so it's like really being thoughtful in how I'm bringing forth these indigenous ingredients and elevating them alongside kind of the known clinically proven ingredients.
Yeah. And I love hearing about you thinking about the ingredients and looking after its function to really incorporate it into the values you want to instill. I do want to dig deeper in the fact that you mentioned there's multi-layers to inclusivity. And I love the fact that you mentioned pricing as well as education. In my previous life, I used to be a pricing analyst, and I feel like people don't talk about that enough, right? By having such a high-end price, you actually are cutting people out of the entry point of the market, and also educating customers is really hard. How are you finding that balance of profit but still accessibility, education, but still making it approachable and fun for the customer?
Yeah, so I think it's multifaceted. So a lot of it comes down to supply chain strategy. Okay. And so really being thoughtful in who I partner with and building in enough flexibility in the supply chain. So that way I'm, even though I'm not maybe purchasing 50,000 units, because a lot of companies have large MOQs or minimum order quantities, but it's about being in bed and being partnered with other suppliers that are like me that want to bring forward this, new phase of beauty, and they'll partner with me even if I'm not, the big guy. Like I'm small and mighty.
And cute.
Hopefully big one day. So I think it comes down to supply chain strategy, me being very, thoughtful in how I negotiate. Yeah. And then on the other end of it, the economic inclusivity is important. So like I am a daughter of two amazing kids from South Central that fell in love, and they were super bootstrapping, had full rights to college. My mom to USC and my dad to Cal. And surprise, they got pregnant her freshman year and they had me. So they dropped out of school. And so as I'm building Undefined, I'm also building it for them because they sacrificed so much. Or even my late grandma. She was a postal worker from Mississippi who wasn't really given a lot of opportunity. And so as I think about building, it's not just about me. It's about all of the legacy and all of my ancestors, but also paying it forward for the next generation of entrepreneurs. So if they can see that I, as a solo founder who doesn't have investment, can launch within Target and be successful, it empowers them to do it as well. Yeah. And then I feel like I went around the question, but like on the pricing piece, I actually last month decided to bring the pricing down. So like with inflation, as everyone's, increasing pricing, I did the opposite because I recognize that people are pinched just across all aspects of their life. And so all the products on my Shopify site are now $24 or below. Amazing. So it's really like giving the value to my consumers. It might be a little bit more expensive if they're shopping at an Ulta or Target, but if they're coming to me on my website, they're going to get the best price, but they're also going to get samples. So that way they can try some of the other products and fall in love with them. So like there's a lot of reasons I'm trying to bring forward for someone to shop me D2C versus my retail partners. As much as I love my retail partners and they're very important to me scaling, I feel like through my website, I can offer more value.
For the concept of a solopreneur, you are like the epitome of it. And we're so lucky to have you with us to share your journey. And I think like what you've done really well is to also get help that is through like freelancers or consultants. And that is so important as well. So any tips there when new founders are starting out and they're seeking help on those like kind of freelance basis?
I would say events. Okay. So I have this amazing designer named Orlando who's actually been with me since the beginning. And I met him at Cosmoprof. Yeah. He worked for a big packaging house and I was too small to work with them. But he's like, I believe in your vision. And he created like the first iteration of everything. And he's been around all 7 years. He also has a full-time job, so he's helping me on the side. But it's like finding people that really want to ride for you. And I have found people through events, through like networking. A lot of it's word of mouth because I am a little bit different. Like I don't have deep pockets to pay people. And so it's finding people that really believe in my vision of democratizing beauty and want to be part of, this journey with me.
I had the perception of the homeless, and I was about community work and making a difference and everything in my early 20s, but homelessness was always at the bottom of the list. I was the guy that would drive by people on the street, whisper under my breath, go get a job. And because it was difficult to see somebody like holding a sign outside of McDonald's, and you're like, why don't you just walk into McDonald's and apply for a job? So that was my perception of homelessness. When my mom ended up in the situation, it changed my paradigm. And made me realize like anyone can end up in that situation at any time. And so I think that's what we're really seeing now is like you're seeing an increase of the homeless population. But these are people that are just have experienced, a lot of them, normal lives, or something traumatic has happened in their life to cause them to end up, on the streets. And it could be due to a lack of community, or it could be because of addiction. There's a lot of different causes, but these are people that are ultimately mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters. And so when it hit that close to home, it completely changed my understanding of why people could end up on the street.
Changed your understanding, but it also motivated you in a certain way. This became the impetus for your business. Walk me through how you went from seeing your mother going through this, for lack of a better description, horrific time in her life to you starting this brand.
I was moved to do something, and it was difficult to help her at that time. She was going through some things, and she was across the country. And so I just started calling homeless shelters in my area to see what they needed, and they said blankets. And I was familiar with the 1-for-1 model because Tom's had pioneered that whole concept. And at the time, I really wanted to figure out a way, how can we take the 1-for-1 model to the next level? Because I thought it was a great business model. But I felt like there was an evolution to it. And because homelessness is such a local problem, like it's everywhere in the United States, there's homeless shelters all over the United States. I thought it would be interesting to localize the 1-for-1 model. And for every blanket that I would sell, I'll donate a blanket to that person's local homeless shelter, giving people an opportunity to make a difference down the street from where they live.
We're going to talk a little bit more about the 1-for-1 model later in this interview, but just for folks listening, this is for every purchase, essentially, you're doing something else. There's a secondary donation or action from one
we'll
sale.
Send a blanket to your local homeless shelter, and we base that off of a zip code.
It's an interesting business model, but when you think about it from an economic standpoint, basically you're giving your blankets away at half price, right? And when you started your business, you didn't have any business experience, right? You had, I think, somewhere around $2,000 in the bank, right? No college degree, if I'm right. I mean, these are extraordinary hurdles. You didn't start with that cushy, or maybe to use a Beatles reference, that silver spoon, right?
Yeah.
You were starting with basically from the ground.
Yeah.
What was the first thing you did to start that business?
Yeah, the first thing I did was basically park my car and have a depressing moment of trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. Like, I was 24 at the time. I was applying for jobs. Nobody was getting back to me. My mom's going through this situation. And then I came up with this blanket idea, and I wasn't doing anything about it. And so everyone knows, like, there's a difference between having a really good idea and actually doing something about it. And so I found myself in my car, parked in this random parking lot. And yeah, I'm like sitting in my car, seats leaned back all the way. My knees are up on my steering wheel, and my coffee cup was sitting on my knee. And I looked up, and on the coffee sleeve, it said, "What are you waiting for?" And that was like it was just a weird moment, because your first thought is like, what the hell? Coffee company puts quotes on their sleeves. But you have this question like staring at me in the face. What are you waiting for? And I just took it as a sign. I actually took a photo of it and said, one day when I give a TED Talk, I'm going to blow this photo up on the screen and tell this story. And that ended up happening. But I started my car, drove down to Joann's Fabric, bought a sewing machine and a roll of fabric. And that's what you do when you're starting a blanket company.
You sewed your first blanket.
I sewed the first blanket. It's pretty janky. But then I realized after that one, I'm like, I'm horrible at sewing, and had to find local seamstresses in my community to like help make blankets and, you know, something that was actually sellable. Yeah.
What an inspiring story. I mean, here you are sitting in your car, this kind of kismet moment where you're like looking at this coffee cup. But there was something else that I think maybe you're selling yourself a little bit too short on, which is this idea that, sure, we've all sat with great ideas. Sure, we've all seen this moment of motivation, but you took that and did something. You did something about it. How did you encourage yourself? How did you take yourself from idea to execution?
Yeah, I mean, to give a little bit more context, at 19 years old, I moved to Monmouth, and there was no Young Life there. Young Life is a Christian nonprofit, and Young Life had a huge impact on me when I was in high school. And so at 19 years old, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start Young Life here in this community. And that's where I got a lot of my experience of building a team, forming a committee, calling people on a mission bigger than themselves. And that really, I was coming off of literally seeing an entire community be transformed off of starting something with absolutely nothing. So by the time I was 24 and I had the idea for Sackcloth and Ashes and the blankets, I was coming off of a pretty strong season of momentum of feeling empowered to be able to start something out of nothing and actually do it. And so a lot of people are like, oh, how did you find the motivation early on in Sackcloth? And I'm like, this was not unfamiliar for me at that time. It was difficult for me to get started because I knew nothing about blankets or fabric or anything, or business. Like that was new territory, but I wasn't
Small
unfamiliar.
details.
Yeah.
Blankets, business. Right?
But I wasn't unfamiliar with taking a leap of faith into the unknown and having a lot of moments where I'm looking up into the sky and being like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm willing, you know?
I was just like, I don't know if I want to do that just because like it could feel a little icky if there's like an ulterior motive to connecting people, you know? Like I kind of just like connecting people for the sake of connecting people. And then around that same time, I had given up coffee and I'd started drinking more tea and specifically matcha. And, you know, a friend of mine, Paulo, he was getting ready to launch his first flea market. And he was like, you know, I know you've been doing the matcha thing. Why don't you bring it and serve it at my flea market? Because like, I want people to walk into my flea market as if they're walking into my home. Yeah. And he was like, my mom's empanadas are going to be there. We call it Carmen's Empanadas. He's like, we have a pizza shop in Osaka. We call it, you know, Henry's Pizza. He's like, why don't you just call your thing Rocky's Matcha and pop up? And so that was kind of like the genesis of it.
All over the internet, people have been reviewing Rocky's Matcha, and the consensus is that they all love it, which is hard, right? It's a homogeneous product. It's hard to stand out. So how did you go about finding the right taste, the right flavor profiles?
I look at like what's going on like TikTok or like Matcha Talk as they're calling it now, and YouTube and, you know, Instagram and all these different like social media platforms right now in terms of like just people going out and buying a ton of matcha to try because they want to, you know, find their favorite sort of flavor profile or taste profile or what have you. And like, I was basically doing my version of that. I just wasn't putting it on the internet in 2021, 2022. And so as I went out and started doing that, and as Japan sort of reopened back to the world in late 2022, I was able to go and meet with different producers and, you know, get a sense of what was out there, what's available, develop my palette, and sort of kind of go from there. But I would say, you know, a lot of what I'm seeing on the internet now is basically what I did. I just so happened to do it a few years, I guess, maybe before this trend, and here I am, right?
Yeah. Well, you're essentially looking for production partners. And was there a checklist for you to kind of look for when you're looking for the right producer?
I mean, we've met like producers like all sorts of different ways. Like and then there's also distributors that we work with producers that we like, that we visited. I don't know that there's necessarily a checklist as much as there is like Max, my business partner, and I, we joke all the time that we just kind of like go off intuition. Yeah. And like the name of our holding company as our inside joke is that it's Intuition Corporation, you know?
Oh, but really?
I mean, I'm just, it's an inside joke, but we've gone out there. I've gone out there, you know, probably 10 plus times now, specifically with the intent to either find matcha or meet with producers or just survey the landscape of what's available. But we've met producers all sorts of different ways. When I was first going out there with the intent to find matcha and specifically find producers, it was a lot of just like knocking on doors, getting connected to people. There is a gentleman who's a Forbes 30 under 30 member in Japan. He's a, tea master, youngest tea master in Japan. We had gotten connected to him through somebody at Blue Bottle. And when I was in Japan, he was like, hey, if you're going to, Uji, I can set you up with somebody. And he ended up setting us up with one of the most revered producers in all of Japan, who we kicked off our sort of matcha business with. And to this day, we still work with them. No set of actual rigid checklist. It's more just trying to meet people, trying to, get to know them better and get an understanding of what they're about, what their values are, if it kind of aligns with what we're doing. And then we let them know that, we're here to obviously help grow their business, but at the same time, we want to do it in a very respectful manner and, we want to do it responsibly.
It feels like you really know how to make connections. Even when you were working at Nike, you were connecting the brand beyond sports.
Yeah.
And also, someone who's Forbes top 30, but then connecting you to Blue Bottle. So what's your secret to developing those connections and allow people to be excited to want to help you out, to make introductions?
I would say just being genuine and, it costs you nothing to be nice, right? And I feel like I have to now, because things have gotten busier, I have to constantly remind myself of that. But just being genuine, being nice and sharing with people that even though we might come from different parts of the world, that, we share, at least for me right now in my sort of path on this matcha journey, we share a love or an affinity for tea. And one of the cool things that I would say is when I was recently in Japan, we did a pop-up and I had straight imposter syndrome. I was like, here I am, Chinese American, selling Japanese green tea in Tokyo. Is anyone going to come? Is anyone, and we were kind of we don't know what's going to happen. And I think what was really cool about that experience was, more than anything, was the fact that so many people within the tea community in Japan actually came to that pop-up and introduced themselves and were like, hey, we've been following what you're doing. We really like what you're doing. It's so cool that you can pop up here in the heart of Tokyo and, share our product with the world. There's a Chasen, a whisk maker that we've been working with for a number of years now. We went and visited with them. They traveled all the way from Nara, which is
where
probably
the deers are, and also good
exactly,
matcha. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They traveled all the way from Nara to basically come and visit, and then they it was so cute. They brought whisk that they were we hope that you can use these for the pop-up. And so that to me was probably the most meaningful thing, was just knowing or learning that people that we respect so much and want to share what they're doing with the world could appreciate what we were trying to do in terms of just dimensionalizing what they do for a living. Because, tea in Japan, matcha it's one of those things where the general population in Japan doesn't necessarily consume matcha because it's been used to kind of cater to foreigners. And there's more of it that's being exported than there is being consumed domestically. And so tea as a commodity in Japan is it's one of those things where it's lowest common denominator. People are just trying to figure out what the cheapest version of it is, because it's something that you just get when you walk into a restaurant or when you go somewhere. So there's not this prestige that's necessarily put around it at a mass consumption level. Yeah. That's not to say that there aren't, amazing tea schools and there's sort of artisans that want to preserve that craft. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying at a mass consumption level, tea is very much a commodity,
Yeah. It's also so common, right? Also, for us, there is this novelty that we embrace with it right now. But I think what you are doing right, and that's why everyone was so excited at that pop-up, is that you truly pay respect to the tea culture in Japan. So I guess what is your advice there when new founders are approaching an industry? How do you make sure you pay respect to where products are coming from?
Shopify is one of the best platforms out there, right? And I'm not just saying this, but like anybody and everybody can basically start a business now because of Shopify. And I think, with that comes a great deal of responsibility as an entrepreneur, because wherever you're getting your product from, capitalism is great. We obviously thrive in this capitalistic society, but at the same time, I think it's just important to like have either, transparency or line of sight into who you work with, how you treat your production partners, producers, supply chain, et cetera. I think it's one of those things that it's super important. And for us, when I visited with the chasen maker in Nara, like, one of the more profound visits that I've had, they make 7 or 8 chasens a day. That's it. They literally only make 7 or 8 a day. And so I feel honored to be able to tell their story and to give them a platform and to, be able to showcase their product. And sometimes people don't understand why something costs what it does, but then it's our job to sort of tell that story and to go out to these producers and shoot content with them and sort of help storytell what they're doing. Because it's not like, obviously everybody wants something right away. I mean, Amazon's made that really accessible, right? You can order today and it's here like within a few hours. But then there's still all these sort of like traditional crafts, whether it's in Japan or China or, other parts of the world, that there still should be maybe some light shed on that. And what you're paying for is the craftsmanship and the attention to detail and the hours that person spent making whatever that object is, as well as just time spent perfecting their craft.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, of course, like those moments where you have at the pop-up was like a great milestone, but we also have to highlight, at the beginning, you also heard no's when you reach out to suppliers.
Yeah.
What do you say to people who are like going through that process, trying to look for partners, but they're also facing some rejections?
We had reached out to one of the more storied producers when we first started, just cold. And, they have a website that's built on Shopify, and we just emailed them, cold emailed and was like, hey, like, would love to work with you and get an understanding of like, your product offering and this and that. And they like never replied. And then it wasn't until like 2 years later that they replied and they said, hey, we see what you're doing. And I literally could see, because his reply had my original email on it.
Wow.
And it said like, I wrote to him in 2020 or 2021 or whatever it was. And he replied in 2024, essentially.
Crazy.
And so I guess persistence and, having conviction in what it is that you're doing, I think is super important. And if you believe in what you're doing, stay on that path. And, I think good things will happen.
It can't just be what we already see in the plant-based milk space right now. Like, I don't see anyone talking about how Black people and people of color are more lactose intolerant than anybody else. And that is, like, to me, such low-hanging fruit for a demographic that you can sell to. Because the problem isn't that people aren't going to spend the money, it's that they don't have access to it to spend that money.
And you're lactose intolerant yourself.
And I'm very lactose intolerant.
Or also they don't know that it's a product that is accessible and is available to them, and even they can experience this thing that they only see like, yoga moms enjoy.
Sure, of course. Right, so the idea is there. The relationship is there, which is super important if you're going to start a business with someone. But then comes execution, right? You could have an idea, you can be the best of friends, get along great, but then you have to sit down and execute. You had this experience putting on that party, that gala, it worked out well. I would imagine that you two have spent hours and hours tasting weird liquids that would eventually turn into ghost town oats, right?
One time I drank so many different oat milks that like I almost threw up. And I was only taking like sips. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to throw up if I have another sip of oat milk. So we've literally tasted every oat milk that was available in January of 2021. And we knew what we hated and what we liked. And a lot of what we hated, because we're baristas. We're trained to
We're very pretentious.
Think about it's not pretentious. Like that's the thing.
I'm very pretentious. Let me be.
People think it's pretentious, but it's not. It's like you have a vision, or like I feel like I have a vision, and I know what I want to taste, and I'm like, okay, it's problem solving. It's like what is it that I don't like, and what is causing what I don't like. And you pick those things out, and then you solve to get rid of those things or make those things better. And that's what we do all the time as baristas. When you dial in the coffee or whatever, you're drinking something, be like, what do I not like about this? And what do I hate about this? And then how can I manipulate all the variables and figure out how to get something that I like? And because if I know if I like it, then other people will like it.
Which very much was like the thought going into this process is like, if we know that if we like it, tons of other people are definitely going to like it. We've just been doing this for too long.
Right.
And like, we have tastes. Like we come from families that are cooks and come from areas with very good food. So we just wanted to bring all that together because this wasn't going to just be any other oat milk that we have already seen and worked with in the coffee shop space. It was going to be something that had to be inclusive of a demographic that had been spoken to, and that demographic wants some good tasting stuff.
They certainly do, just like anyone else. And I love, Ezra, that you're buying what I'm selling, this idea of problem solving, because I can hear it right there in your retelling of finding the proper product. But for folks who are entrepreneurs who want to create their own food product, not necessarily milk or milk alternative, what advice might you have for going through that process and finding the right recipe for your product?
Same thing. If you have a product and that thing exists, say I want to make applesauce.
Love applesauce.
Think about what do you like about applesauce and what do you hate about applesauce. Write all those things down. And then think about each thing you hate, what affects that? Each thing that you like, what affects that? And then start iterating, single out those variables and change one variable and be like, oh, this tastes better, but then it makes this taste weird. So like, how do you make that not taste weird? And just do it until you get a product that you love.
So if I can parse what you're saying, it's focusing on what tastes or resonates with you. That's the most important.
Yeah, like I was always taught like...
I like some weird stuff with the weird taste, you know what I'm saying?
I was always taught that if you think something tastes good, then other people will think it tastes good. Like we're not as weird and particular as we like to think. We just have to get people on board with what we like. And, people just need to know what to expect, what they're getting. That's the big thing. So,
Michelle, when did you know you had the product that you wanted?
Actually, when Ezra did the sign off on it, because when we got the final samples to LA, they were overnight shipped and they were supposed to be cold. They did not tell me when they were shipping it, so I was not home. And it was the summer of 2021, so they were bad.
Yeah, they were just frozen jugs.
Pretty much.
In a thermal packaging.
But Ezra was there at home and got the final. And I trust Ezra with a lot of things, including the formulation of this oat milk. So I was very anxious for about 7 months not having tried the final product. But Ezra's like, no worries, I got it. It's fine. Because Ezra's a Q grader, which is like the sommelier of coffee. So I was like, okay, all right. That's fine. But once I finally got the blue sample carton and I tasted it, I pretty much almost cried. I couldn't believe that we had, from a distance with a team just kind of back and forth across the country, had been able to formulate an oat milk in under a year.
You guys kind of postal service the
pretty much.
Yeah.
That's exactly what.
So, okay, let's go back now. So this is 2021, right? You've got this killer product.
Right.
You're both happy about it. It didn't come to you in the right shape. We trust Ezra. Eventually you taste it, emotional about it. Now comes getting people to drink it, right? Distributing it, right? So you two called on your coffee connections to get this stuff in cafes all across town, especially here in Los Angeles. I think you launched with what you thought would be 4 to 6 months of inventory.
Yeah.
And it went much quicker, right?
2 months.
Yeah.
2 months. So how did you do that?
Well, to back it back up.
Let's back it up.
We are the baddest bitches in coffee. People love us and people trust us for all those reasons that, we've already gone over. So when they all found out that we were making a product, they're like, I'm sold. And we didn't really realize that until we launched our WeFunder, which is like how do you explain WeFunder? It's like a crowdsourcing.
Equity crowdfunding.
Yeah, equity crowdfunding, that's right. And we were like, we'll get like $50 here and there, whatever. But in like 2 days, we were already at or 4 days, we were at $100,000.
Sure was.
And, we got up to what, $250?
We got up to $250, and then, they got the platform fees and stuff like that.
Sure,
we took away $210,000.
Yeah. And so we were like,
and how much time?
It was like 4 days. We were already at the plateau point.
Entrepreneur's dream right there.
We closed it within a couple months.
Some investment outside of that because of the WeFunder campaign. And so
Jimmy Butler was one of the original supporters, right?
He's a stan. He's a big stan. Loves it.
And so we knew people believe in us. People want to support us.
Right.
People have expectations.
Yeah, but we were still a couple months away from launching at that point. So it was just I believe that we still didn't quite, feel like, this is going to be super, super successful, even though money is quite a big driver of success. But, for us on the team, we're like, we need the physical product. We need it to be in places. And some of the conversations that we had been having with our coffee connections is that, they were really excited, but they were really hoping it didn't suck. We were like, same. So then came June 2022, which is when we finally launched. And we had 2 distributors here in LA, one in Chicago, that were the first ones to sell it. And that 8 weeks to sell out 6 months of product was nothing that we could have ever imagined.
Yeah, it was so fast that it was like,
we didn't even have any. Where's my stock at home?
Yeah.
Ezra, let's move now to scale. You talked about this idea. You brought up your first WeFunder campaign, netted close to $210,000. How did you get that started and what made it so successful?
We really, really thought about what messaging we wanted to put out and what it wanted to look like. And that was mostly Michelle, who's the writer, and Eric, because I will say my writing is I will say, it's great. Period. So they're the more floral.
We know how to tell a story.
Sweet topics. Yeah. So
should I direct this question to Michelle then?
Well, I can tell you what they did. I was there. I witnessed it. But so they put together a very good video that was it was 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That basically distilled everything Michelle talked about her past and everything that we believe in as a company, and showed some local baristas, and it just captured our whole vibe very clearly. And
did you focus on some of the big societal issues that are relevant to folks who are doing something similar to you?
Yes. Would you say that, so Michelle?
I would say yes, but still with it being very centered around what we were hoping to do just at Ghost Town. The idea, not even the idea, the very real concept of food deserts. And that was talked about in that video. And just connecting that past experience that I had with, here's this girl who is gathering up with her friends and they're all baristas, creating this oat milk that is barista quality, the best that you can think of out there, and trying to connect it back to people who deserve it and therefore feed those people. And that video really captured this full circle that we were trying to build, that even though we didn't have product at the time when the WeFunder launched, it still found a way to show this is going to be something that you'll be able to see very, very soon. And funnily enough, a lot of the coffee shops in that WeFunder video are current accounts of ours now.
The continued distaste in what I was currently doing. It was hard for me to let go of that feeling, even when the world came back to normal after COVID, and music shows started up again, and the music industry kind of started to just kind of get back into motion. It just kind of, there was a distaste in my mouth in terms of why was I doing this, and what, and really losing sight in that. And the real reasons I got into the music industry was community building. I felt like there was a lot more room for it pre streaming platforms, pre Spotify, pre iTunes, Apple Music, given the necessity for more regional communities to support regional artists in ways like merch and shows that felt more community driven, and felt like you can exist within a bubble, and that is okay. You don't need to compete with Taylor Swift for streams to feel successful. And that was the time when I got into the music industry, and that was a very fun time because it was really geared around strictly community building around artists. And I started to lose sight of that, towards the end of my career. But then it was nice to really understand, wow, that is what I really like to do. Like you could sub in anything: food, music, outdoors, clothing. I think for me, the piece that always was going to remain the same was that I liked being the producer of bringing people together around a common interest. So for me in music, that was artists and that was shows and putting the microphone literally up to people that I felt were interesting in the music world and sharing their story and helping them share their story and, creating opportunities for them to reach people. What I do now is it's funny. It's exactly the same. It's just instead of a rock and roll star, it's a forager.
Yeah. And I love that it's only when you're reflecting, you can see the dots connecting together, and that past experience really translates to showcase all these experts and artists in a new way. Of course, at the foundation, it's the events. And I think there's a lot of complexities, right? There's nuance and there's a lot of interaction and a lot of uncontrollables to actually make a quote unquote successful event. So I guess for you, how do you ensure an event is successful, is good for each individual participant?
Yeah, I mean, I think the understanding for whether it's your company or yourself, what determines a successful event is very much steeped in knowing before that event even starts, well before what deems something successful to you. Which there's so many metrics. For some people, that's amount of people. If I can get 2,000 people to this event, then it's a successful event. But I think what people lose sight of when they're thinking about scale as a metric of success is what people actually took away from that event individually. What was the experience that person had? Do you care that they left that event without really thinking at all about your brand or connecting to anyone else in a deep way? They came with their friends, they stuck around their friends. They maybe took one picture that they posted on their Instagram story, but after that event, are they going to carry that flag with them? Or was there something there that they learned? Has their life altered in any way? Do you care about that metric? Which can be a no, and then in that sense, it's just about reach, and that maybe one Instagram story is part of that KPI that lends itself to, deciding what feels successful. For us, what a successful event is very different. It's very much quality over quantity. It's been a lot of testing to understand what is the size of an event where people stop being able to speak to others in a way that feels natural. When you're in a room full of 10 people versus a room full of 50 people, you'll notice the way that people talk is different. You'll notice that they're not as open. You'll notice that they'll maybe stick to the people they know. You'll notice that it's a little more awkward. So for us, well, then that means maybe 50-person events, as much as we could probably sell 50 tickets, doesn't deem a successful event. So finding what that number of people, because for us, a successful event means that people are walking away and they've met someone new, or they've learned something that they now are really interested in, or there's something that happened at this event that has, clicked something in their brains that has opened up maybe a new gate, a new way of thinking, or just allowed them to feel like they're accepted now into a world that maybe they felt was really hard to get into, which for us can be the outdoors or outdoor experiences. So that is a successful event if people are able to get to those kind of different things. And measuring that becomes pretty hard, but I will say when we have like a 40% return customer rate with no subscription model or anything like that, that to me is that plays exactly into the success.
Yeah.
So it's a long-term kind of play. It's, maybe not a quick kind of flashy, scenario, but to me, I've been to so many events, played shows at Coachella with bands that I've worked with, and so I've seen it all. But I think that starting low and slow, starting, smaller events, getting people really integrated with each other, that's exciting to me. It's just a different model. It's just it's different than what I see out there, and I think for me that feels unique and exciting.
Yeah. It is special because you care about the impact it has on the participants. I think it also kind of ties back to the ability that you and your team are able to spot these interests and create events around them because they're so unique. From making ceramics from forged clay to making sourdough, diving in the ocean, stargazing, fly fishing. How do you know which kind of events to create? How do you spot trends and make events around them?
We're very lucky because me personally, I'm very ADHD with my interests. So curiosity plays a huge role in what we do. And like I said, thankfully, I'm a very curious person, and I find so many different things interesting. And I think a lot of communities maybe center around certain levels of outdoor activity that are maybe more wellness. And so then you get the tea ceremony, breathwork, yoga side. And some communities center around outdoor activities and maybe more physical. So you get the more running super fast, climbing big mountains. For me, it's everything, so, or it's even from a food perspective, I find that that's super interesting and learning about where our food comes from. And then innately that becomes a nature experience. Learning about how your food is grown and where it comes from locally. And that's something I'm also interested in. So everything we do lends itself to myself and my other three partners, our interests, So everything you see is kind of a weirdly aligned thing of what's going on in our heads at all times, So me personally, I love to surf, I love to climb, I love to run, I love to camp, I love foraging, I love learning about invasive plants versus non-invasive plants. Stargazing, it just opens up the idea of what is around us and how small we are. And, all of these activities to me just remind me of where I'm at and where my feet are, and lets go of kind of the superficial, I think, reasons why people don't live in LA, and reminds me of why I actually love living here. As far as seeing trends spike, and I feel like we don't really have any metric or algorithm that tells us, oh, we should be doing this or that, other than how our community responds to things we put out there. So a lot of it is trial and error, and not being afraid to do an event that maybe, okay, that one didn't connect. I wanted to do, for the longest time, I wanted to do bushcraft skills. Do you know what bushcraft skills are?
No, what are?
So that's learning how to essentially say, if you were to drop in the middle of the woods and you needed to find food, make a fire with nothing but your hands, that's essentially what, learning bushcraft skills are. And I was I've always been super, yes, exactly,
on a next level.
So I've always been super interested in that. And I was great, I finally found the guy, put the event. I'm this is going to go crazy. No one bought a ticket, no one wanted to go. And that's okay, and I think like I said, I think failure is also a great metric for knowing where you are just as much as successes. And it's all good. These are all things that build back into who we are and how we want to showcase what we do. So
yeah,
even if things are failures, there's still successes to be had in them.
Yeah, you're learning a lot from them, and I feel like you're being also modest. You do have a lot of sold out events, and I think what's cool is you've maintained a very low cost that is accessible for whoever wants to be a part of an event. And I think the question here is, how do founders create something that is still accessible and impactful in whichever way they're doing, and still be profitable? Because I think there's a lot of elements at play here.
Yeah, I think that is the number one question, that if you can figure out, you're gonna have a good successful business. If you're a business that is at the ethos, which for us is accessibility, is very much steeped in like who we are and how we represent ourselves. So what goes into accessibility? Obviously, the idea that anyone can come to our events. There's no Soho House metric of like needing to be accepted or club, like collective vibe. It's anyone at any time can sign up to any event. So that goes into the accessibility factor of it. Obviously, what other things go into it? Access to gear. A lot of our events, especially the camping trips, we have gear that has been donated from people like the North Face, amazing, like brand new gear from REI and things like that people get to use for free on our events. Because a big thing for me is like, why should you pay $2,000 for a fly fishing setup if you're going for your first time and you have no idea if you actually want to keep doing this? It doesn't make sense. We've figured out ways to do that for like snowboarding and skiing. You go to a mountain, you can rent gear, and then you like it, cool, then you go buy it. There's not that kind of way of doing things for things like fly fishing, things like climbing, surfing, all these other, awesome activities. They make you kind of go all in, right? So accessibility also lends itself to gear, and we try to work around that with having a gear library. And then, like you said, yeah, the price point. For me, it was kind of a deep dive into, okay, what is out there? Maybe there's no USOL version community in LA, but what's in the world? And seeing how people essentially price these types of things kind of blew my mind. How expensive experiential travel, outdoorsy, essentially companies are. It's stuff that I wouldn't even be able to afford in this, where I'm at in my life, in my like mid 30s, let alone when I was, maybe coming out of college, which I'm like, not to say that our demographic is trying to be for that generation, but more so what's interesting to me is speaking or having a place for people that never have been able to do these types of activities. And a lot of times those are the people that don't own a home yet. You know what I mean? They aren't the kind of 1%. They don't like drive a fancy car. They aren't able to kind of like spend that amount of money for fun, essentially, for leisure. The communities were either, pricing people out, or a lot of these communities were going the nonprofit route, which is great. But I felt a little bit intrigued with the idea that like, people doing these types of experiences, the teachers, for instance, like they should get paid. I think like if people are spending $20 on a coffee every single morning, what's it to them to pay $30 for a foraging hike? I feel like the scale was just not, it was so either one way or the other way. I felt like there's a lot of middle ground for finding a price point that made sense to our community, to LA, but wasn't asking too much, for no reason really. After doing all the research and what it takes to do all these events, it's not that expensive to run, on the way that we do it. So we try to make the prices as cheap as possible, right?
Very interesting part about Compartes is we've actually been in business since 1950. Of course, I wasn't 15 years old then, so I'll get to that in a moment. But it's really an old school chocolate shop, just like you might have in every small town all across the country and even further than USA. What we've really done is create it and make it new and modernize it at the same time, but still keep all the old-fashioned hand craftsmanship and values that was what we started with back in 1950. So when I was 15, my family bought the business from Mr. and Mrs. Comparte, who were the original owners. And it was, again, like a boardwalk chocolate shop. We sold fudge and stuffed animals and gummy bears. And my dad sold anything he could put a price tag on. And I wanted to modernize it and make it a cool, hip, vibrant reflection of Los Angeles through chocolate. And just started to, play around in the kitchen and go from there.
Yeah. And I think there's a little bit of tension between that, right? Preserving the legacy, the story while modernizing. So how do you reconcile the two sides?
That's really interesting, actually. So I think it's really important to keep tradition while still modernizing. I think you can have both. For me, with Compartes at least, I didn't have any formal training of culinary training, business training. I was going to UCLA at the time, and I was going to be a lawyer. And I thought, what do I like better? Making chocolate and making people happy, or like being a lawyer and having to argue for a living. So for me, I just kind of invested myself into creating this chocolate brand and creating a brand of things that I would like to shop and things that would appeal to me and to my generation while still keeping true to the customers that have supported our business for all those many years.
Yeah, you've chosen the sweeter path in life. And I think a part of preserving the legacy is also incorporating the essence of Los Angeles into your creations. There's also this great Hollywood connection. Talk to us more about that.
So I've grown up in Los Angeles. I'm a native Angelino, and I'm heavily influenced by LA. And you can see that reflected in all the different things from the brand, whether it's the ingredients that we use from sourced from farmers markets. We have a donut and coffee chocolate bar, which is our bestseller that I go to my favorite donut shop that I've been going to since I was a kid, and we get dozens of fresh donuts and we break them up and we put them in the chocolate. And then you look at the aesthetic, the packaging. So I have a lot of things with palm trees on them, and it's really inspired by LA culture. And LA is such a melting pot of different cultures and different things. And I think you can see that translated into the packaging and the tastes and really all things Compartes.
It's really taking inspiration from the city and also sourcing ingredients and really incorporating and representing the city.
Absolutely. I mean, it's my backyard. And LA is a part of me just as much as LA is a part of my brand. And I think that's another interesting thing because you see a lot of brands that are very connected to a place, but there's not a lot of brands that are connected to LA. So for me, it was really important, and staying true to myself was to really use that in the brand identity a lot. And again, just, sort of being inspired by everything around me. And because we have such a great melting pot of different ingredients and flavors and restaurants and art and fashion and all those things are incorporated, with the chocolate being the canvas, but really the story that I'm telling is the story of LA.
And I think sometimes people think about Hollywood and movies. I feel like there's also that connection as well.
Yeah, we have a ton of celebrity clientele that, have been loyal to Compartes for many years. And we do a lot of chocolate for movie premieres and, all sorts of different TV shows and you name it, being in LA, all sorts of events, because not only do we do our regular chocolates, but we do a lot of custom chocolate. But that Hollywood history, that kind of Marilyn Monroe used to shop at Compartes, Frank Sinatra, the Kennedys, and I use that as part of the DNA because I really like kind of Art Deco inspired things. So that's in the packaging a lot. We have a bar inspired by Marilyn Monroe, and there's not a lot of brands that get to say that Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley have bought their stuff. So I think that's a really cool and unique selling point of Compartes, and we've always been really attached to Hollywood, just as Hollywood's attached to us.
Incorporating an essence of Hollywood's legacy into your own legacy. And I love what you said about also staying true to the way that you've also made chocolate as well, because a lot of the times people think, I need to modernize every single aspect. And you've actually said slow and steady wins the race. You still make things by hand. Why is that so important to you?
Being that I took over Compartes when I was only 15 with no training and no background, I only inherited all the old-fashioned ways of making it, which is by hand with old-fashioned equipment, with humans, no conveyor belts, no robots, and it's worked. And for me, if something's not broken, why fix it? This is what I know. It's the time-tested, time-honored, traditional way of making chocolate. And really, I've leaned into that So every single piece is still made by hand. And like our chocolate bars, for example, are different and more unique than I would say any other chocolate bars in the world because they have chunks of ingredients in them. And the reason we can have these big chunks in there is because most brands buy equipment that has the chocolate in a piping system and it shoots it into the mold. We're doing it all by hand. So the chunk would get stuck in the pipe and that would be it. For us, we do it by hand the old-fashioned way. It takes more time, but there's so much heart that goes into it, right? It's like cooking everything from scratch. When you go to your favorite restaurant, that's an artisanal, cool restaurant versus going to a mass market restaurant, a Pizza Hut or a McDonald's. There's a different way of doing things. And I think that that's really important. And that's something that I'm not willing to sacrifice or, change. It's part of Compartes.
This sounds philosophical, but I feel like a home cooked meal, you can taste the difference. There's intention and there's process. So I totally believe that.
Yeah, even if it doesn't taste as good, sometimes I make my own meals sometimes and I'm like, I should have ordered out. But, like a lot more love goes into it, right? And that is really part of it.
Totally. And another part is even though you're in this world of chocolate, you don't actually look at your competitors or look at any other chocolate makers. You actually take inspiration from other industries and look at fashion, for example. Why is that important?
For me, I don't want to ever be influenced by anything else going on in chocolate. I don't come from a chocolate background. I didn't learn how to make chocolate from going to a school. I'm sure there's, like master chocolatiers. I'm not a master chocolatier, but maybe I am, like doing it the old-fashioned way. I taught myself. I used Google as my reference a lot. I remember when I first started, we had these recipe cards from Mrs. Compartes, and I was making English toffee by hand from scratch with our old-fashioned copper candy kettle. And our English toffee is amazing. But it took me like 20 tries and it kept going wrong. And I didn't understand what was going wrong, but I went to Google to find that out. I think that's the kind of modern day and age we're living in now where people can be self-taught. You can be an amazing cook from home. You can be an amazing business owner without going to business school. You can be a great designer without taking tons of, classes on that. That's not to say that's a negative either, but I think there's different paths for different people to get to the same result. And for me, with chocolate, I look at that again as like the canvas. And the story I'm telling is a story of fashion. It's a story of food. It's a story of art. And chocolate is just kind of the means to get there. And that's also great because everyone loves chocolate. I say that all the time. It's like no matter if you like dark milk or white, where you are in the world, what country you grew up in, what background, we all have chocolate that's a part of us as a culture. As a kid, we are given chocolate as a reward. It's always like it's at the grocery store aisle, right? Like we all have our own love and feeling about chocolate. So for me, it's an easy way to kind of get in and tell these different stories that I tell.
To me, like the most exciting moment we've had as a company was when the first time I started hiring people, when it went from my co-founder and I, Cole, doing everything, wearing every hat, to providing jobs for people. I get excited when we're starting a new employee. I always make sure I go up and find out about them, make sure I know their name, where they live, et cetera. And that still brings me the greatest joy.
I think there's something so interesting about that process of bringing other people in, because on the one hand, it's like, oh, great, like I get to not wear 67 hats and I can deputize people who maybe have skill sets that are even more developed than mine, bring smarter people into the equation to fill in my gaps. But sometimes there can also be a little bit of difficulty in terms of letting go of the reins when it's your baby.
It's still a challenge. It's a little bit like, I've never had to send a kid off to college, but there is this like, oh, how are they going to survive without me? And if you're a good CEO, I want to be the dumbest guy in the room. And my ego doesn't want to be, but if I've done a great job, I will be the dummy in the room. And I'm fine with that ultimately, because the fact is the company's what's important. The company's what pays all our employees. The company's what produces this amazing product for the public. So the healthier it is, the more successful it is, everybody wins then.
How do you approach the hiring process and building a team to ensure that you're bringing the right people in and that they can also like continue to carry your vision forward?
I'll be frank now, like people reach out for jobs all the time because, we have been so successful the last few years. I think we have a good reputation of being a great place to work, and we respect people's talent, their career aspirations, but also like I respect their lives. Like I walk through the office at 5:30 and I'm like, get out of here. I yell at everybody, go home, because I want them to go home and spend time with their families. Yes, I want you to work really, really hard, but I only want you to do it for 8 hours. Then I want you to go home and live your life. We were competing for talent in 1920. Now really good talent's coming to us. And then we have the benefit of going, do they fit who we are? Because culturally, I want to create an environment where the employee is nurtured both professionally and personally. And we have fun together, like we do company happy hours, we do these company lunches, and like every single person's at the cool kids table at lunch, and we just laugh. And I love when people aren't talking about frying pans then. I like when they're talking about each other's kids or vacations they have coming up, because I think like then people don't want to leave. And that is the thing I'm most proud of. I can count on both hands. So less than 10 people that have either been fired or have quit our company since 2016.
Wow. Are there like actual character traits that you would point to in terms of any advice for the business owners out there in terms of what it means to be a good leader and to be able to sort of inspire that enthusiasm and galvanize your team?
You as a leader, and it doesn't mean just the founder. Like some people will throw that in my face because I'll do stuff like people will see me and I'll be in like the men's room and I'll be cleaning the men's room because it's dirty. And I know that somebody's going to do it eventually, but I'm not above cleaning the men's room. I wash the dishes if people left coffee mugs in the sink because they're dirty and somebody's got to do it. And maybe if they see me do it, somebody else will do it. You got to be able to roll up your sleeves. Like I've had people, a high-level executive for us, and we did an event, and I saw one of our junior people she had to break down like 100 boxes from all the product we'd sent for the event. So I went in, and I'm like, she goes, "Oh no, you don't have to do it." I'm like, "Let's get out of here. Let's do it." And I had somebody senior, and I'm watching this person like, stand over there, and I go, "Will you get over here, grab a fucking knife, and cut these boxes down? What we're going to be here forever."
Yeah.
And it was like an aha moment for them. And it kind of registered. And we joke about it now. We'll talk about the boxes. I'm like, come on, there's boxes to be done. But that's it. Like you got to lead by example. You got to be willing to do anything. And you got to be willing to stay a little longer, work a little harder. And if you do that, then that just trickles down. So it's really important that you lead by example.
You've spoken a lot in the past about the failures that preceded Hexclad and its massive success. Can you talk a little bit about how those failures have actually set you up for being able to be in a state of continued consistent success today?
Yeah, yes. I would say this, even if it's like something in your youth, when you fail, whether you're playing in the Little League championship game and you lose, I remember the bitterness of that. And one of two things is going to happen, right? When you fail, you're going to just like kind of sulk and go, well, wasn't my time. Or you're going to be like, God damn it, what can I do to be a little better the next opportunity that I get? And whether it's like as a little kid playing sports or whether it's, a test you take in school or in college, but when you start businesses, it's okay to fail. It's how you react to that failure. And how do you look at it and then go, what is truly my role in this failure? I've said this to my team before. I'm like, people look for the reasons we weren't successful or something underperformed. Somebody will scour the room looking for the answer. And the last place they look is in the mirror. And the fact is that very often we don't want to admit the role we played in a failure. And when Cole and I started the company, our first product failed. I've talked about it. It was a good product, and we misjudged the market. It was a cold pressed juicer, and it was at the beginning of the juicing craze. And stupidly, we never thought that, if people love juice, they're going to start opening shops all over the place. And I knew when I heard Whole Foods was opening a juice shop in every store, And I went to New York and I saw every corner market had a juice shop. And I'm like, this is just a matter of time. And that was the hardest decision I ever had to make, was like 5 p.m. on a Tuesday. We were in the juicer business. And 9 a.m. the next morning, we were not in the juicer business. Like, I had to shut my baby down, at that time. Now, after it was over, once cookware started getting successful, like all of these people who I trust was like, oh, I always hated that juicer idea. And I'm like, well, why didn't you say anything?
Where was the honesty?
Yeah. And they're like, you didn't ask for any hard, criticism or advice on this. And I may have had a difficult conversation with you then. And then I said, you know what? That's something I got to learn. I got to go to people and tell them the truth, because you might have a shitty idea and you need some tough love, or you have an opportunity to sell them on that idea. And if you do it properly, you're learning how you're going to sell the public that idea and why you're going to make their life better with whatever widget that you're bringing to market.
Thanks for tuning into Shopify Masters. Subscribe for new episodes every single week. And if you're ready to start your business today, click the link below for your free trial. We'll catch you next time.